Welcome back. So as promised, I want to talk about the Vancouver Canucks. It's been a little over a month since the last time I talked about the Canucks in a video just about the Canucks because things have changed, right? And they started December 5th, so we're almost a month from when they changed. And it'll be over a month since things have changed when they play their next game. And it's been a month that has seen them without a loss in regulation. It has been a remarkable run. However, the question comes up a lot with the power rankings from last night, why they haven't moved up more. I have no problem with explaining why. I have no problem with talking about them because it's been fun to watch, right? And so on December 5th, Benning and Green are both let go by the Canucks. And while Green and Benning might be great guys, really, absolutely, I haven't heard anything bad about Travis Green as a person to hang out with, talk to, that kind of thing. It just wasn't working in Vancouver. And that happens. You'll have a situation where it's just not working with a coach. We've had the discussion on this channel many times over the last 5.5 years about how much coaching might make a difference or might not. I've seen teams doing really well and seen people say, well, anybody could have coached them to a Stanley Cup. Anybody could have coached them to that record. Doesn't matter. And then as soon as things go wrong, they need to fire the coach. But you said it didn't matter. So anyways, December 5th, things change, and Bruce Boudreau's brought in. And yeah, it really changed things right out of the gate. December 6th, this was a game I was at in Vancouver, and I'm wearing the jersey I wore that night, Brock Besser, who scored the first goal in what would be a 4-0 shutout for Demko. And this is the Demko hat. This hat available through vanbase.ca, which is the website for the Vancouver Canucks store. And yeah, Demko, Besser, and Miller are your 3 stars. That was a great game, and it was a fantastic refresher considering this was a team that had one of the worst records in the National Hockey League at this point. Then on the 8th, the Boston Bruins come into town. And that's another game that I'm at. And now I'm sure there's people already mentioning in the comments, so what's with the red numbers? All right, let's talk about the red numbers. The red numbers are where teams currently sit on the power rankings board. I'm looking at right there. Kings are 15th. Boston's 18th. They won a game tonight, but I didn't move them up that much because that's not how how the board works. So Vancouver beats Boston in a thrilling shootout, 2-1. Shootouts, and I've had this discussion before. Very often when somebody will say, well, this team's on a huge winning streak. Why didn't they move up much? And then I look, and I realize a lot of those wins are shootouts, overtime, or they're against teams near the bottom of the standings. Teams aren't playing very well. So at the end of the night, I'll look and go, well, this team won in a shootout, but I treat shootouts like ties. So if you're playing against Ottawa, if you're playing against Chicago, a team that's below 500 and you win in a shootout, I kind of look at that and go, it's a win, but it's not this decisive win. I put more stock into the regulation wins. So the shootout win over Boston, I think, moved them up a little bit, but not much. The win over the Kings, not that much either, because again, it's the competition as well, right? So then the number 19 rated, again, currently, Winnipeg Jets come in on the 10th. That's a 4-3 win in a shootout for the Vancouver Canucks as well. So that's 2 straight shootout victories. Höglander and Demko get into the 3 stars in that one. And I mean, shootout wins are probably the best high, like, emotionally you can get at a hockey game. That just emotionally just brings you right up. Like, it's fantastic. Like a shutout, like the shutout's nice and everything, but the shootout is, I mean, those words are really close to one another, but it's a different experience when you're there live, right? Hat tricks are kind of fun too. I've seen those live. So then you get from the shootout wins over Boston and Winnipeg, and you get to the game on the 12th that I think was the most impressive game they've played all month. That they beat the Carolina Hurricanes 2-1. Again, this is in Vancouver. Demko, Myers, and Pettersson were the 3 stars in that game. And again, beating Carolina is no easy feat. Now, the question, too, of, well, how tired was Carolina from a previous game? It's valid. But at the same time, you can only go with who they beat on what night and all that, right? So that was one that I put a lot of stock in. Then on the 14th, so what's nice here is all the games are every other day. And hockey players and coaches have said they really like the every other day hockey, right? Maybe 2 days between games here and there, but when it's hockey, off day, it's a really nice routine you can get into. So they were down 3-0 against Columbus, and I was of the mind of, all right, so they've lost this. But then they came back and won it 4-3. And your 3 stars in that included Horvat and Hughes. Horvat's been very good under Bruce Boudreau. His game seems to be completely different. And the biggest change seems to be shoot in all situations. Situations where the Canucks were overpassing so much under Travis Green, now they're actually taking the shots. And the thing with it too is that I know people are upset about Pettersson and they're trying to trade Pettersson and all this. Pump the brakes a little bit. Pettersson's been better under Boudreau, and it's going to take him a little while to get going, but I think there's too much talk about, hey, we should trade him. When his value's lower, I don't think that's a good move. And Miller's been kind of the heart and soul guy for the team, so the idea of they should trade Miller, I don't know. See, again, and I know Besser, there's the whole uncomfortable $7.5 million qualifying offer he has to get, and they don't really have the room for that, but that's next season. I don't think you make that move now. So, December 16th, San Jose, they go down to San Jose. San Jose is currently 21st on the board, whereas Columbus is 23rd on the board. So at this point, Vancouver's playing against teams they're right around the same spot on the power rankings board with. They beat San Jose 5-2. Your 3 stars are Besser, Horvat, and Miller. So again, clean sweep of the 3 stars for Vancouver. Very, very sharp game for them in San Jose. Impressive to see. Then they go to Anaheim 13 days later. So we have that huge pause. Everything's fallen apart. And so coming out of that, it would be understandable if they're slow. And the Canucks kind of were. They end up coming back and winning, though, in overtime 2-1 in Anaheim. Anaheim's currently 16th on the board. It's been a rough few weeks for Anaheim, right? So Miller and Hughes are in the 3 stars for that one. And again, Anaheim, I know they're missing Zegras. I know Getzlaf didn't play tonight. But again, when I'm doing that, updating the board, I look at the results. I look at who you're against. I look at how the team's playing, what the trends are. And yeah. So for Vancouver, this was really a matter of they weren't playing top 10 teams. And they really haven't throughout this. So this was a perfect time in their schedule to make a change behind the bench. If you want to take the cynical view, Francesco Aquilini makes this move when their schedule is arguably getting a little easier. And they should be able to rack up some wins. And I'm not saying that there's 4D chess going on like that, but it makes some sense if you thought that way, right? So then they go to LA on the 30th, so the next night, and that game goes to a shootout. And Vancouver loses at 2-1. LA, as I stated before, they're number 15 on the power rankings board currently. So then on January 1st, last night, they go to Seattle, play the number 29 rated Seattle Kraken, and they win 5-2. Your 3 stars include Demko and Garland. So Demko's in the 3 stars again. Demko's here, Demko's here, Demko's here, and Demko's here. And one thing I was thinking when I watched that game last night was, I wonder which team in the NHL has had 3 stars in their games which include the opposition goaltending. Because I think for Seattle, it's probably a pretty high number. But I haven't gone through and checked that yet. That's one of those things I kind of have to do from the start of the season. I was also thinking today it would be interesting if I tracked how a team wins and how a team loses every game. Again, this is a next season thing. So that, if a team goes 3 for 5 on the power play, I say this team won by their power play, this team lost by their penalty kill. Oh, you won 7-1, this team won by a blowout, this team lost by a blowout, and find different reasons why teams win and lose. I think that'd be interesting. Because again, when I'm trying to figure out rankings for teams and pulling what's left of my hair out, there's a lot that goes through my mind with that when I'm updating every night, right? So when we look at this run by Vancouver, 5 wins are in regulation, 1 wins in overtime, and 2 of them are via shootout. And the 1 loss they have is in a shootout. So again, by my count, that means that they are 5 wins, 1 loss in overtime, and 3 ties, again by how I measure it. So it's a really good run. I'm very impressed with what they've been able to do. They've moved up 12 spots through these games. And it's remarkable they've moved up 12 spots because, again, they haven't played those top 10 teams minus Carolina. However, that changes this month. So they get a week off in between games, which is brutal. Bruce Boudreau's already said, how do you get momentum? How do you stay focused? How do you get on a roll when you don't play games very often? So they went 13 days without games. They play 3 games in 4 nights, and then they have a week off. And then they're at home against Ottawa on the 8th. So Ottawa's a lower ranked team. It's the only game they'll play before the next power rankings. So for them to move up on the next power rankings, currently they're ranking 17th. They kind of need teams ahead of them to lose. So they kind of need that to happen. And then things get really, really interesting on January 11th, where I think the Canucks will prove that, yes, they're in the playoff hunt, or nope, this has been just a really nice run. It'll be a lot of fun, but there's still a lot of building to do. They go to Florida on the 11th. They go to Tampa on the 13th, Carolina on the 15th. Those 3 games, that could go a long way to deciding whether or not they're... And I don't even know if it matters if they win. If they lose, say, 2 of them in overtime, and another one's a regulation loss, but it's by 1 goal, that's still pretty impressive depending on how you get there, right? If you have a 3-0 lead and you lose 4-3 in overtime, it's a little less impressive than if you lose 2-1 and it's a really close game the whole way through and, you know, just a little bit of bad luck. But then the next night after Carolina, they're in Washington. And then they get 1 day off before they go to Nashville. So this is between the 11th and the 18th. They have 5 games on that road trip. That's a brutal road trip. If they come out of that road trip with 5 points, I don't care how they get them. I don't care if they're all overtime loss, shootout loss. If they come out of that if they get 1 win in there and some overtime loss points to get to 5 points, it doesn't matter how they get it. That would be impressive because Florida is currently number 11 on that board. Tampa's number 6. Carolina's number 2. Washington's number 4. And Nashville's number 12. So there's nobody in that grouping that I think is a gimme or an easy game. Then they come home on the 21st, providing the schedule unfolds this way. And at some point they have to let Canadian games happen. And then they're at home against Florida. So again, number 11 currently, but threatening to go up. And depending on what happens with Pittsburgh, who are number 9, what happens with Minnesota, who are number 10, Rangers number 8, all that wonderful stuff. And then after 1 more day in between, then they get to play St. Louis in Vancouver. And those games can be kind of fun. And for some reason, the Canucks home games against St. Louis are usually some of the cheapest games. And even after they won the Stanley Cup, they didn't become a more expensive game. I was always surprised by that St. Louis isn't a bigger draw in Vancouver. So then they go back out on the road. And this is where them losing the homestand really kind of hurts them this month. They go to Winnipeg. Winnipeg is tough. And Winnipeg's right around where they are on that board right now. Only 2 spots behind Vancouver. Then they go to Calgary. Now, Calgary's better on the road than they are at home, but Calgary's number 13 on that board. And then they go to Chicago. Chicago may be looking for some revenge. They're number 26 on that board right now. And we'll see how things turn out. So this month, I think, is a huge proving ground for the Canucks. The upcoming month. And if at the end of January, this team is above 500 in the hunt for a playoff spot, I will be a lot more optimistic about their chances of actually getting in. It is not going to be easy, but the remarkable thing is because they win these games here, because they get the points where they should against the teams that rightfully they should beat if they're going to get in the playoffs, that means these games actually mean something. By where they were before December 5th, this part of the schedule just looked like, oh yeah, they're going to get killed. Yeah, that's where they're just, are we going to get Shane Wright yet? The other side of this, so they've outscored their opposition 29-15, and I'm including shootout goals, which is weird. The NHL counts shootout goals as goals, but the guy who scores the game winner doesn't get credited for a goal on their record. I never understood that. If you're not going to, it's weird. But with the Vancouver Canucks and with where they are, and what I was going to say too, one thing that might bode well for the Canucks, I had to pause to get my train of thought back on the tracks. So 2015, the Vancouver Canucks magically made the playoffs, and that was after a really rough year in 2014, and they didn't make the playoffs again for a while. 2020, they make the Stanley Cup playoffs, and then 2021, they don't. Whenever there is a big talent in the draft that's got a lot of hype around him, like Shane Wright right now, it kind of feels like when there's a really big deal in the draft that the Canucks suddenly are a playoff team, and they're not in the running for that draft pick. So don't be surprised if over the next 2 years the Canucks make the playoffs and maybe lose in the first round, because then they don't get Wright and they don't get Bedard. And I can't argue that this team couldn't use a Shane Wright or Connor Bedard or a Michkov. Any of those three would be pretty good in a Canucks jersey. But that's kind of a rule. It is kind of a rule that when a team is in need and there's that franchise player in the draft, all of a sudden the Canucks are in the playoffs, or they lose the draft lottery. So we'll see, right? We'll see if the fact that Shane Wright's got all this hype means the Canucks make the playoffs. And then the year after, well, Bedard, Canucks make the playoffs. We shall see. But there you go. I will be very interested to see how this month goes. I am back into the cautiously optimistic territory, but it's just cautiously optimistic that this team will continue to grow and at least show that pride's kicked in and they're going to win some games. They're going to stay in the hunt. That's really all I can ask for. So let me know your expectation right now. And has it changed over the last month? And if your expectation hasn't changed over the last month, why not? Whether it's positive or whether it's negative. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. And hopefully this explains why they didn't move up like dramatically into the top 10 on the power rankings, because you got Seattle in here, Columbus in here, and just teams in general that have been either not fantastic, just not the top 10 teams other than Carolina. But this month, a lot of top 10 teams there. So let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And it's nice to listen to I'm Still Standing after every win. The only time that I've done that with a team is listening to Shipping Up to Boston every time that the Boston Bruins won, which peaked in 2010 and then really went up in 2011 as well. I used to blast Shipping Up to Boston every time the Bruins won a game, and now I'm listening to I'm Still Standing by Elton John, because that's the winning song that they play at the arena when the Canucks get a win. That's a fun song. So there you go. They can't keep using Simple Minds as a goal song though. That's not good. So anyways, there you go. Thank you guys so much for all your support. It's fun to talk about them when things are going well, and we'll see whether or not that remains the case. This could be a tough month. Thanks again for all your support. I'll talk to you again soon.